Welcome to the Pink Pill RX podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking subjects surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok at Caters88.
That is KATORS88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow.
Episode 5, How Patriarchy Harms Men.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we started this conversation on accident 4 or 5 days ago. So we're going to play that clip. It's about 10 minutes long. The audio is not the best because we were not recording it with an intention of putting it on the podcast, but it just turned out so good that we want to. So if the audio bothers you, you can skip ahead probably about 10 to 12 minutes here and then come back to us because we're going to discuss further what we discussed in the video.
I think Aragorn is what masculinity looks like in its complete form, because you have him who's like, he's a ranger, he lives like in the wilderness, ridiculously good fighter, fierce, brave, loyal, intelligent, right? So you have those things that are kind of like more stereotypical, but then you have this other side, like where he's self-aware and he doesn't want to be like a Isildur, his ancestor. He doesn't want to succumb to the temptation of the ring, and he's self-aware about it, like in that scene. And then he's able to resist it with Frodo at the end of the first movie. And you have him, and then you also have him, he's like, because of his elvish upbringing, you also have him being like more like emotionally connected, and you have him like, I mean, the guy, I think he shut Boromir's eyes, but he kissed him on the forehead. You have him, he sings elvish. You know, you have like this other side that is more like in tune with his emotional parts.
Mm-hmm.
And I out of every fictional character, he's my favorite one, because he like, I feel like there's a completeness to him. Like he's got this, not just the masculine parts that are like stereotypical, but he's got like a completeness, because he's like more like emotionally, and he's not emotionally bound up, and he's cultured. Like he's not, it's not like a feminine thing to like poetry, or, and then he's also like self-aware, and he takes care of his people, and he's reluctant to be king too. The fact that he doesn't want it shows that he's not hungry for power.
Right.
But he ends up taking the mantle, knowing like this is what needs to be done. I like him.
You know that other part that you're talking about, that's like these feminine parts that you don't, but like that you identify with and you like.
Yeah.
I just want you to realize that's what the patriarchy stole from you, because the patriarchy hurts men that way. Because that is a man. It's all of it. It's not just the one-sided, but it takes it from it, because the patriarchy hurts everybody. And they took away emotional men, or men that had emotional intelligence. And do you know what is recommended for men who want to grow empathy?
I don't know.
Reading fiction.
Really?
Yeah. Studies have shown that it has raised men's empathy, reading fiction. Because you see these interactions. You see, in this example, you see Aragorn, being both those things, and being a good friend, and being a good love interest, and being just a good citizen in general. And you aspire to be that way. And so that's why they say, if you want to grow your empathy, to read fiction.
It's interesting when you say what patriarchy takes from men. Like, I have a lot of experience with that. And, you've mentioned this as a broader point, but like at some age, like boys stop getting hugged.
Yeah.
And I was always more of like a sensitive kid. Not necessarily, I don't mean that like in an easily offendable way, but I mean like my emotions ran a bit more intensely across the spectrum, And I always felt like, because of my peers, like because of like movies and video games and stuff, like there's something wrong with me. And so I was no longer free to be myself. Instead, I try to just be as nonchalant, you know? And, it made me feel alone a lot
Mhm.
because I felt different in that way, at least from what I saw. And then I felt like I had to restrain myself, and I felt like just I wasn't right. And I mean, that affects me to now because it really like altered me, and it's like I'm still trying to dig back to where like my authentic person is, because there's so many layers of it's not normal to be a man and to have strong emotions and to express them, and it's not normal to be sensitive, and it's not normal to not like video games or sports, but instead you prefer music and writing. I've always felt kind of like disconnected because I'm not really big into sports and I don't play video games. I feel like it's hard to be a guy when patriarchal culture tells you that the way you are is wrong. It does all kinds of things to you. I mean, it tears down your self-identity, your self-esteem. You feel the pressure to be something else, so you try to be something else, and in the process you kind of lose who you are. Gosh, it was really hard growing up. That's why I like Aragorn though, because he I think he's able to embody the full spectrum of qualities that I admire and find traces of in myself. Versus like I like a William Wallace character.
Yeah.
Like from Braveheart. Like I love a William Wallace. But like what was his whole deal? What started his whole deal? The loss of his wife. And the deep hurt and pain he had out of that.
Yeah, you see the heroism
Mm-hmm.
be born out of the emotional pain
Yeah.
of every single character that you read or watch, or else that violence has no meaning.
Yeah, it's just violence.
So it's with
For the
the
sake.
emotion that brings the meaning.
Yeah. I tried to hide parts of myself when I was an adolescent
Yeah.
because I didn't think it'd be accepted by like my guy friends or just like peers. And then, like you're already a teenager, you're already trying to be something to be accepted, and it's hard when you're trying to be something to be accepted and you're also suppressing something to be accepted. Yeah. Like yeah, that's hard. But like I'm at Paul's house after you broke up with me and a Coldplay song plays, very much connected to you. I start crying, then what happens? The guy behind my back after makes fun of me, which already like reinforces like, yeah, it felt like it sucks to be a sensitive guy, because even guy friends who I thought was my friend um makes fun of you for it. Yeah, and that really stung, and that's a deep one for me, that experience, that specific one, because it was more than just about the situation. It's a message.
You store that in your body. I know that you do, because I know logically now, if a guy would do that, you would think you are so stunted.
Oh, I think you're so immature. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, but you can't get it out.
No.
Like, you're trying to get it out,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying that like the damage we do to boys,
Oh,
they can't just think themselves out of it as
no,
men.
because it's in your body.
It's in your body.
Yeah.
You have to deal with it at the root level.
Yeah,
And so many men just never get there because they don't.
Well,
it takes so much work, so much self awareness and self empathy.
And it takes help.
Yeah.
And I don't know what form that takes. It might be from friends, it might be from a spouse or like a girlfriend, but it can also be like, I know how much somatic therapy has helped me, because there's things that are stored that I can't deal with or I'm not even consciously aware of. And I've needed help from a therapist to like connect to it,
Yeah, your body feels 80% of your emotions.
Right, and your brain is
20%.
20%.
So when you are trying to over logic something and fix something that you feel in your body. It doesn't work that way. You got to go from the bottom up, baby.
That video of Aragorn I showed you, I was watching it last night in bed. I think you were already asleep. Cried watching it, and I didn't really know why. Like, do I feel inspired by it, or no? It's because like I identify those parts in me that have just always wanted to come out, and be made whole.
Be made whole literally because you've been cut off from half of yourself.
Yeah.
From that more what people would identify as a feminine side, which is just a human side. And the vice versa is the same. It's just a human side. It's not a masculine side.
Right.
I think girls experience the inverse of that. Like when they show masculine traits.
Mm-hmm.
There's something wrong with you.
Oh.
You're a B. You're this. You're that. It just is flip-flopped. We're a lot more similar than what we give credence to.
I've never connected that before. That like how I feel like restrained with the parts that the world will call more feminine parts when they're really not. They're just human parts they're just human parts. That's how women feel. Yeah, that's it. I've that makes me look at it a little bit differently. Like it hits home more. Like I can empathize.
Yeah. I'm happy that kind of, you could make that correlation a little bit more strongly between women and men.
It's just a human part. Yeah, and we make ourselves less than fully human if we divorce. I feel like I've been less than fully human because I've been divorced from.
I've never thought about this before, but the gender as a cultural construct, you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
It is damaging.
It is, yeah.
It is damaging because if we could just be human, then we could all have a whole experience.
We could have our whole spectrum of emotions and like ways that we show up. I think it took that character for me to really kind of like connect with what's been going on.
Yeah.
And I've been really into Lord of the Rings lately.
Yeah.
I'm reading the Silmarillion.
Hey, fiction increases empathy.
Yeah.
What's interesting is I feel like it increased empathy towards yourself.
Mm-hmm. I found a character I could identify with.
Right.
But this just allowed me to have compassion on myself and feel like parts of me like are welcome.
Yeah. All parts are welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel bad for the boy and the adolescent boy who gosh, I feel bad for him.
I feel bad for him too.
Yeah, and I imagine how my experience would have been different if the culture would have been different, and if like myself and my peers were raised differently. Because I had a lot of bullying too, which didn't help because I'm already a sensitive person and not like, at least I didn't feel like I was like a lot of other guys in that way, and so then you add that on top of it, just reinforces it. And the bullying that I was getting, which was like, late 90s, early 2000s.
That's a special brand.
It was a lot more like obnoxious boy masculine stuff, Like that was back when somebody would call you a sissy or make fun of you for having emotions at all. Angry, sad, upset, I don't know what it's like now, but I know that's what it was like then. It just makes you retreat in yourself. It makes you hate that part of yourself more. I feel like Gen X bullying was on another level. And I was like, I'm an older millennial, so like I had some Gen X experiences, and that was like brutal.
Since recording, do you have any additional thoughts?
It's hard for me to wrap my mind around all of the factors that go into how the patriarchal system harms men, because I feel like it comes at us from several different angles from infancy forward. Often, our fathers were given similar messages from their fathers or from the culture of their day or from the peers as they were coming of age. So they're influencing us. And then our peers are influencing us. And we have our pop culture at large that influences us, and our pop culture at large that influences our peers. and our peers as fathers influence our peers, and our peers influence us. So we have these like three different arrows coming at us from our upbringing, from our peers, and from our pop culture that reinforce the ideas of, vulnerability is not something associated with masculinity, that being sensitive or having feelings and being able to articulate them and desiring to talk about them, it has no part in masculinity, that needing others has no part explicitly in masculinity. Like, you don't talk about that necessarily with other guys very much, but you might experience camaraderie through, shared interests and, whether things like going to bars with your friends or playing sports with your friends or watching sports with your friends. I mean, there's things that offer camaraderie, but I think oftentimes it's not even a man's inclination to discuss things that are on the more like internal world side with other men. A lot of us are just kind of islands existing with things going on internally. They're not being discussed with each other. And then, we all feel like we're going through stuff by ourselves as a result.
Now, you have said before that you don't feel like some men that you've been friends with in the past or are friends with have the similar emotional depths.
Yeah. It's not necessarily about you, buddy.
No. But do you believe that, like, really in your core, that, like, you just are so different? Or do you feel like men feel like you?
No, I feel like at my core, I am different. And that might be correct. It might not be, but I do for several different reasons. I am neurodivergent. I have ADHD. So emotional regulation is different for me than it is for somebody that doesn't have ADHD and the dopamine issues and the wiring issues that I have. Also, I've always just been a sensitive person with a lot of feelings, whether that's related to ADHD or not. People sometimes sometimes don't like the term of highly sensitive person, HSP, but if that is a label that is accurate, I find myself identifying with that. You said a statistic is like 20%.
It's 20%, and
right?
It's not gender specific.
Right.
So 20% of men and 20% of women
right.
are highly sensitive people. It falls into that category. Now, I know there is a lot of debate about that term.
Yeah. So if I am a highly sensitive person, that puts me in 20% of men. And then couple that with ADHD, which is another smaller percentage, then it makes me, at least statistically, feel like I am in a minority of men that might have the spectrum of emotions and thoughts that I do. But also just like growing up, going to public school, at least what I saw in my peers, what my peers would show of themselves, not a lot of range of emotions. So like I had friends who were that way, but it was hard to find other guys that either A, had strong feelings like I did, or at least B, would express them to where like, hey, I would see you're kind of like me.
Right. You said not a wide range of emotion that you saw.
Yeah.
And do you think that's innate or do you think that's conditioned? Because if it's innate, then of course, then yes, at a biological level, you are different. If it's conditioned, then that's circumstantial and not biological.
Yeah. It's hard for me to separate my feelings of this experience that I had when I was growing up versus my observations as an adult now, because my gut reaction as a kid is to be like, oh, that's just the way that you are. You came out that way. But I think as an adult reflecting on it, I think it more likely is some type of conditioning. Often young boys are sensitive, but at some point that changes. And I used to think, oh, that's just puberty. It's what all the testosterone does to you. But I'm wondering now if it's more of like a social conditioning that shows there's not a place for that with your gender. So you need to figure out how to not be that way, or not feel that way, or not express yourself that way.
You had said to me, if I could, or if you could, prove it with evidence that your circumstance is the result of a patriarchal system, that would bring you some kind of peace or solace, or make you feel more confident in sharing your feelings with other guys, because it's kind of like then, quote unquote, sticking it to the man versus being a man.
Yeah, I think that it would do two things if I knew with a decent amount of certainty that this was like put on us to be this way versus we're
That
just
it was
natural.
nurture, not nature.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would do two things for me. One is, yeah, it would feel kind of like it's an act of rebellion then to be able to display my truer self with other guys because um, I'm kind of taking a stand against something systematic or cultural that is trying to make me into something else. And I think also, if I really did know it was nurture and not nature, then I feel like I could look kind of like behind whatever facade, whatever acquaintance or friend that I'm talking to, and just know, no, deep down, we aren't the same. You are like me. So I'd feel more comfortable displaying me because I would know, if you're not displaying it, we're more alike than I thought.
Well, I'd like to take a shot at it.
Take a shot.
Let me pull out some research for us here. I want you to think about how much your childhood has impacted you in other areas, meaning how much nurture does truly impact you and mold you and change you.
Okay.
Okay, so just keep that in mind when I'm saying this stuff, because this is not stuff that you would have picked up on. This is stuff that's built in. Okay? It's preloaded for you, my friend.
I'm here.
This is what you get if you're born a boy. There was a study conducted by the University of Sussex that said that adults are more quick to respond to an infant female's cry and tend to show a delayed response time in addressing an infant male's cry. Adults often also assume that an infant's high-pitched cry is that of an infant identified as a female, even attributing feminine characteristics to an infant with a high-pitched cry. This goes to show that gender stereotyping first begins in the family before the child even begins entering public spaces.
Wow.
Research indicates that a child's gender identity is often, and we're not talking about understanding what's between your legs, but understanding what's expected of you as a boy versus a girl. They can see that is understood by the child as early as age 3.
This is all very sad sounding to me.
I mean, this is sad. Hasn't this been sad for you?
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
So NBC did a piece on this about 6 years ago, and they titled it "Toxic Masculinity in Boys is Fueling an Epidemic of Loneliness." I'll link this YouTube video in the show notes for you guys. But they were exploring the fact that anger is often the safe or acceptable emotion for a boy or male to express. That is the emotion that is safe. This often perpetuates loneliness and isolation. So when you're only displaying anger as the acceptable emotion, of course, anger is isolating. And so they followed different ages of groups of boys, okay? So within the video, it demonstrates boys' desire to have friendships with other boys in which vulnerability and emotional intimacy are present, okay? They can see this. I believe in the video it said up to age 12. It might have been up to age 10. I can't quite remember. However, there is a tendency and a trend beginning primarily in early adolescence in which boys are discouraged from this level of emotional intimacy in their friendships with other boys because there is a fear of being perceived as gay. Can you relate to that at all?
Oh, yeah. Because, when I was in middle school and high school, you did not want to be perceived that way because that was something that would make you targeted. I don't want to be perceived that way. It was make my life a lot harder if I was.
I wonder, do you truly think it was homophobia, or do you think that it was more femophobia, meaning that it was this view of being feminine?
Oh. Like, are you asking me?
I'm not asking what their motivation was.
Uh-huh.
I'm asking what your motivation was to hide.
I don't want to be bullied.
I know, and you perceived that if I display what, then I will be bullied.
I see what you're saying. No, it is definitely more feminine characteristics. It's not like my checking out a guy or something. It's no, I don't want to show too strong of emotions that are, not anger or excitement or something like that. I don't, I shouldn't like walk a certain way or talk a certain way or dress a certain way because I'm going to be perceived as, it's all feminine stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So we know that this starts early, and we know also by science, fun fact, on a biological level, everybody has the same amount of neural connections and ability to experience emotion. If they do not, it is like a birth defect of some sort or some kind of injury of some sort. that would prevent that from being the case. So we're just talking about apples to apples here, girl, boy, okay? Now, there are some structural differences in female brains that do give them a little bit of an edge on the empathy side of things, okay? But as far as experiencing emotions, that has nothing to do with that, okay? But they can empathize with other people slightly better than men can. On a structural level, it appears.
Okay.
However, the scientific consensus indicates that the boys' decreased emotional skills are largely a result of societal conditioning rather than biological differences. Research shows that from an early age, boys are socialized to conform to rigid gender norms that discourage emotional expression and vulnerability. And this socialization creates a framework where boys learn to suppress those emotions, leading to difficulties in emotional regulation, interpersonal relationships. And while both genders possess similar emotional capacities, societal expectations shape how emotions are expressed. So boys are faced with the pressure to embody traits associated with that traditional masculinity, toughness, stoicism, and that hinders emotional development. So the challenges boys face in emotional expression are primarily influenced by cultural factors rather than inherent biological limitations.
Wow. That's a little staggering. That's a little staggering.
But that just the scientific community agree. Yeah, that's the deal. That's what's happening here.
So then, because that's not how men present in society, then it's something that is imposed upon us through nurture that develops us to be the way that we are. Does that change at all post-puberty?
No, it does not. But here's the thing, is the hormones that you're talking about, right? It will cause men to be quicker to anger.
Okay, that makes sense with testosterone, sure.
Okay, or quicker to be aggressive. But it doesn't mean that you don't feel your feels. It just means that your reactivity, ironically, is higher for things that would make you angry or violent.
Got it.
So on a biological level, we're born with the same emotional capacity, girls inking out barely a little bit more with empathy because of, I guess, some kind of design in one part of their brain. So we see from an early stage, 3 months, as early as 3 months old, there's gender biases that come into play. Now you throw in the fact that there's boys' toys and there's girl toys. You don't want to be playing with girl toys.
No, gosh, no.
But if we allowed boys a wider range of toys to play with, they might want to play with baby dolls. And that's not a bad thing, because guess what? Let's hope that means that man is going to be a great father. These are things we want to cultivate in men.
Yeah, because unlike with okay, you know what? As a kid, there was a big difference between playing with a Barbie or a doll and an action figure. Okay? You're playing with an action figure, superhero, a Ninja Turtle, a Power Ranger, a G.I. Joe, something, totally fine.
Playing with something that has a capacity for violence.
Yes, that's the thing, because there were plot points that would be adventure or action or violence versus playing with Barbies or dolls was all about social relationships. So you have boys that are discouraged from playing with toys that help them explore social relationships. Gosh, because I just thought of that based on what you said. So boys are discouraged from playing with toys that explore social relationships.
Yes.
It just seems so wrong.
We also see around puberty, boys start getting touched less. They start getting hugged less. So they don't even have that physical socialization. We see that men start to become emotionally repressed, okay? And it starts early. They're left to cry longer. There's a stigma around playing with things that would help develop more social skills in relationship and depth there. Boys actually can struggle a lot more with emotional dysregulation, leading to issues like anxiety and depression due to the inadequate emotional support that they receive. Because boys are viewed to be stoic. They're viewed to be tough.
Yeah.
So they also don't get the emotional support from the people at large that should be emotionally
caregivers.
Supporting you, the caregivers.
What's interesting is the boys getting physically touched less with affection and stuff like that. And then, but that's happening from caregivers and peers and stuff, right? But then it's never talked about or explained to the boys. So then you're left with this, not even conscious, subconscious confusion and subconscious loneliness that then you don't even get to talk about. And maybe you're not even aware that it's there because people just slowly stop giving you physical touch and you're left to deal with that by yourself.
Do you remember when that happened to you?
I remember about 7th grade, maybe between 6th and 7th grade. I remember like aunts and uncles seeming less animated and excited to see me, but it was still there for my twin sister. And that felt weird. I remember that in particular off the top of my head. And that felt weird. And I thought maybe they didn't like me as much anymore. I remember thinking that and not knowing what to do with that.
Because of this lack of emotional development, they also have a tendency to develop attachment disorders, resulting in unstable friendships and romantic relationships. It either is characterized by neediness from the man or avoidance from the man.
Okay. So a lot of complaints that are just commonly known by and large from women about men in dating, right? Perhaps it's not all of just this men making these choices, but instead they were reared this way. And so it really is. So again, it is not the man or the individual men that is necessarily the cause of this problem, but instead it is the system of patriarchy that causes this problem in men that then women experience in the dating world.
Absolutely. Now, that is not to say that the man is not responsible for his actions.
Correct.
But if we zoom out and we look at the system, it is the only logical explanation for why we have such a large pool of men behaving exactly the same way, raised by different parents, in different states, in different countries.
Yeah.
Yet women are still having the exact same problems. There's too many variables in there for there not to be a bigger system in play here.
Yeah, common thread.
There's a common thread. Exactly. Because of this lack of emotional guidance and lack of practicing emotional regulation, what does it lead to? Well, it leads to anger issues, poor impulse control, and difficulties in communication, which then ultimately leads to self-esteem and identity issues, where boys often will experience low self-esteem and identity confusion, feeling unworthy or unable to express their needs effectively.
Okay.
If you add in being raised by emotionally unavailable parents on top of that, not just like societally, but if boys are raised by emotionally unavailable parents, they often face challenges in forming healthy relationships in adulthood. They struggle with expressing emotions and have difficulty trusting others, leading to unstable relationships. These individuals often experience fear of rejection and abandonment, which can result in either overdependence or extreme independence in relationships. Additionally, they might develop low self-esteem and attachment disorders, further complicating their ability to maintain healthy connections. These issues can manifest as emotional neediness or complete withdrawal, impacting their ability to form meaningful bonds with partners and friends alike.
Okay. Yeah.
You feel personally attacked?
This feels a little familiar, personally.
Meet up with us next week on Monday for part 2 of this series.
I hope people listening, something was intriguing or it sparked curiosity or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok at Caters88.